You ready, Mercer? You ready to do another AniLysis? Come on. My God, you're getting heavy. You're going to sit down and do the Lila job today. Hello, everyone. Welcome to... Stop whipping the microphone with your... You're just as bad as Lila, aren't you? Welcome to AniLysis. Mercer and I are going to look at Tom. Who is Tom? He's one of the very first characters we meet. Who is he? Let's look. Tom is Jake's brother. Tom is a human controller. A human being enslaved by a Yeerk in his head. My cousin, Tom. Tom is Jake's brother. Of course, Jake being the leader of the Animorphs. And he's also Rachel's cousin. So he's a direct relative to one, nearly direct to two. And what is his last name? Well, we know, because he theoretically shares the same surname as his brother Jake, being that they're brothers from the same father. So what's Jake's surname? My name is Jake Berenson. So Tom is Jake's brother, Rachel's cousin, and his surname is Berenson, so Tom Berenson. How old is Tom Berenson? If they learned he had a gun, Tom was going to live out the rest of his years till his 18th birthday, locked in his room having his food shoved in under the door. It wasn't that far to the beach, so we decided not to drive there with Tom. I'd had kind of a bad day at school. I tried out for the basketball team and didn't make the cut. It was like no big deal, really, except that Tom, he's my big brother, he was this total legend on the junior high basketball team. Now he's the main scorer for the high school team, so everyone expected me to make the team easy. Only, I didn't. You should have inherited some of Tom's moves, Terry said. That brother of yours has a jump shot. Man, Tom could have been in college ball easy, at a good school too, if he would have stuck with it, one chimed in. That boy has the gift. They were right. Tom did have the gift. We can't be sure for certain how old Tom is, but we've got a series of clues from those quotes there. He's not in college. He's not yet 18. But he's driving by the time book 1, The Invasion, comes along. He's also in high school. So that narrows it all down in a consistent manner. You know, there's no contradiction in any of this. He's probably 16 or 17. You got the quote there about him being grounded for the years until his 18th birthday, meaning multiple years, meaning he can't be, well, yeah, he must be 16. He can't be 17 because that's a single year, less than. And he must be 16 because, according to what I looked at, you've got to be at least 16 to learn to drive in the United States in, you know, a lot of places where we can assume that he is. So he's not going to be younger than 16, he's not going to be older than 16. So 16 at the start of the series, he is. And that puts him in high school as well. Jake, as we know in the series, started at 13, so 3 years younger than his brother, which lines up, and by the end of the series he's 16 as well, so it becomes Tom's age, which seems completely irrelevant now. It's a nice little parallel later on. We'll get to that. Let's look next at Tom. Let's actually look at Tom. The only official pictures or images we got of him were from the TV series, which didn't really quite match his description, and the same goes for the graphic novels, where he didn't look quite right. This is Ghost of Essam's attempt at a Tom. And let's look through a few quotes talking about his description and see if we agree. I looked over at Tom. He's bigger than me, even though I'm not exactly small. His hair is darker, almost black, while mine is brown. Tom looks just like Jake, only he's bigger and has shorter hair. Actually, I'm kind of big for my age, almost as big as Tom. You look familiar. You look like a young man I know named Tom. He's my brother, I said. Tom was framed in my bedroom door. He looks a lot like me. At least that's what people say. They always say they can tell we're brothers. For such an important character to the series, as we will discover, as Tom is, we get very, very little description. That's as much description as we got of his physical character for the whole series. So basically, he's a little bit taller than Jake. He's got dark brown, almost black hair. That's a little bit shorter than Jake's, and considering most of the book artwork as Jake's hair is like, yeah, sort of like, he's got the long bowl haircut, isn't he? He's got that weird 90s curve over going on. And he just looks a bit like Jake, to the point where you can tell that they're brothers. So Ghost of Essam has done this image here, and yeah, I think that's pretty good. I think that looks like what's been described here, even though we've had very, very little description. So we've looked at his name, his age, his appearance. What about his personality? What's that like? Firstly, he's a bit of a cool kid, you know. He's a bit radical. How else did they say it? He's ice cool. Is that what they say? Oh, kids these days. He's lit, or he's gat. Is that a word that they use to describe some? I don't know. He's a cool dude. Let's have a look at the quotes. I was on the kitchen phone with Cassie when Tom came in. Oh, there you are, he said. I covered the mouthpiece. Yeah, Tobias said you were looking for me before. I just wanted you to shut your dog up, Tom said. He turned a chair around backward and straddled it. As we all know, only cool kids turn the chair backwards and straddle it. This is cool, right? Didn't see any kids hanging around there, maybe? Nope. It's not like I get them in trouble, Tom said. I mean, I think it's kind of cool. They're just shooting off fireworks and they get all these people terrified of flying saucers. Uh-huh. Flying saucers, he said. He laughed again. Only complete dips believe that kind of stuff. He leaned close. You don't believe in that, do you? Aliens and spaceships and little green men from Mars? I gotta go, he said. He gave me a playful punch on the shoulder. Did you have enough to eat? My mum asked Tom. Tom patted his stomach. Burgers and dogs and chicken. Not as good as your chicken, of course. Actually, your father cooked. He cooked by calling Gourmet Express and having it delivered. But I did microwave the sauce, my dad said. That counts as cooking. Tom winked at my dad. Well, the stuff at the barbecue had to be better than Dad's chicken. Good thing I ate there. Just for that you get no dessert, my dad said. And it's cheesecake from Santorini's. Oh, Santorini's, Tom groaned. I take it back. I apologise. I grovel. I beg. I love Santorini's. Strange having Tom ask me for anything. It was like he was pressuring me. Maybe he was nervous himself and wanted me around as his security blanket. Only a complete dip wouldn't realise that this guy is cool as the coolest cucumber. I know what's cool too, and I see that guy and I think, Christ, he's hip and down with it, yeah? So he straddles his chair. He says things like, "Don't be a dip." He punches your shoulder. I gotta go, and bang, yeah, boom. And he's very cocky and confident, like we saw in that conversation with the parents, including Santorini's. Remember that one? That was good fun. And that last one there talks about how he never has to ask Jake for anything, which implies again that the confidence, the cockiness that comes with being the cool kid. You know, he's self-assured, confident, he knows what he's all about, and he ain't afraid to show it. So yeah, he is the cool kid. But aside from that, he is 16. He is going to be, inevitably, a typical teenager. Something has happened, my dad said solemnly. Maybe you should sit down. Is it Tom? I demanded. Is what Tom? Tom asked. He came in right behind me, giving me the creepy feeling that he had been following me. Tom, you need to hear this too, my mother said. Both of you sit down. Who died? Tom said, joking. Or to be more accurate, the Yeerk in his head made the dumb joke because it was just the kind of dumb joke Tom would make. My brother was in the kitchen. talking on the phone while he smeared peanut butter on a graham cracker. When he heard me come in, he changed his tone of voice. In the old days, I would have assumed he'd been talking to a girl. Now I assumed he'd been talking to some other controller. Don't you remember this, Tom? This is Grandpa G's old footlocker. Tom glanced at it. Then he looked past it, around the room, searching for something to do. I opened the footlocker, filled with sudden urgency. Remember back, I don't know, when I was 10 or so? He showed us his canteen and these pictures of his outfit from the Battle of the Bulge. Maybe, Tom muttered. They didn't know whether they were going to freeze or starve or get shot. That's what he said. Tom rolled his eyes, indifferent. Perfectly Tom, I thought, almost admiring. The Yeerk was keeping up the illusion, playing the part to perfection. He struggled to read the room, like I think most teenagers do, hence the inappropriate joke, when clearly everyone's in a solemn and hushed mood. He doesn't really care about things like Grandpa G's old footlocker and all that sort of stuff, and just sort of sits back and doesn't care, look around for something else to keep his mind occupied. And if it weren't for the fact that there were Yeerks going on and Jake being an animorph, Jake would just assume that he was always talking to girls whenever he's on the phone. Again, it's something you just associate with teenagers, you know, all lovey-doveyed and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, he does come across as a typical teenager. And the Yeerk plays that role because, as we know, he's a controller and the Yeerk has to keep up appearances. One of the things that I've got to put in here is the one time we really see Tom get angry, and it'd be referenced to something in the past. His fists were clenched at his side. His jaw seemed to tighten so that the words could barely force their way past bared teeth. I'd seen Tom this way once, just once, when he'd been wrongly accused of cheating on a test. It was as angry as Tom got, short of punching someone. Strange to think that the one time Jake has seen him this angry where he's... The only time Jake has seen him like that before is when he was wrongly accused of cheating on his test. So Jake somehow knows that Tom didn't cheat on his test and he was wrongly accused, which is fair enough, because usually when someone is accused of... Go watch detective things on YouTube. What do I watch? It's... Christ, what are they called? Ah, that's it. Explore With Us. There's a channel called Explore With Us on YouTube, and they have these interrogation room things where somebody's committed a crime and they come in, and this guy just breaks it all down and lists off the sort of things that give people away or show that they're telling the truth. And one of the things that typically comes up is somebody will get very angry if they're accused of something that they haven't done. Like they'll start shouting and be like, "Why are you doing this? What is all this about?" The anger is usually a result of them being angry that they're being accused of something they don't do. Someone who, I mean, typically, from what I've seen, who has done something, they'll tend to try to keep calm. "Oh, I didn't do that. I didn't do that." So, yeah, he got that angry because he's like, "I didn't cheat on my bloody test!" And so Jake probably believed him, because it was probably a very believable experience. But how often does Tom get angry? We know that he gets brave, which can sometimes come hand in hand with anger, not always. Jake sees his brother as very brave, and he does show it as well. "No, this was Tom, my big brother. Tom would never, ever let those slimy creeps into his head. Never." I saw Tom out of the corner of my eye. He was swinging his fists at a pair of Texans that were circling around him. Tom couldn't hurt them, but he was trying just the same. We'll see another quote later on that backs this up, but just rest assured that the one time we really see Tom free, he attacks the Yeerks even though it's against the odds, and this does become very relevant actually later on. But that's what he does, and he does come across as very brave, and Jake thinks of him as very brave. But there's a part in the conspiracy where the Yeerk, seemingly playing the part of Tom, says, "Well, let's have a look." I lifted out the small box that held Grandpa G's silver star and his purple heart. He was a brave guy. He believed in honour. All the stuff out of the old movies. Honour and courage and all. "Yeah, well, that was all a million years ago," Tom said. Honour and courage aren't what matters, not in the real world. What matters is whether you win. After you win, then you start talking about honour and courage. When you're in battle, you do whatever you have to do. Honour and courage and all that, those are the words you say after you've destroyed all your enemies and anyone else who gets in the way. You're wrong, I said flatly. He rolled his eyes, bored now. You're a kid. This seems in direct conflict with what we know about Tom, even from Jake's perspective, but it's never put across from Jake's point of view that he thinks this is out of character for Tom, this must be the Yeerk speaking. But we can imply that ourselves because Tom at this point is a controller, and he's saying something that directly conflicts with what we see and what Jake believes about his brother. His brother saying, it's not about bravery and courage and honour and all that stuff, it's just making sure you win in the end. I think that's the Yeerk speaking, honestly. I'm saying that's not part of Tom's character, so I'm just bringing it up to say, striking that from the record. Besides, it sounds like something Marco would say, doesn't it? It don't matter how you do it, just win it. That's the Marco thinking, A to B. So, yeah, that's more of a Marco thing to say. But because it's a bad guy saying it, therefore it's a bad thing to say now. God, I hate that sort of writing. It's true, it happens in Animorphs a lot, doesn't it? And it is a fault of the Animorphs series where if a good guy says something, then it's nuanced and interesting and usually good. If a bad guy says exactly the same thing, oh, that means he's an evil bugger, you know, that's not true. You can't believe that. Once again, it brings up, and I've brought this up in another video quite a long time ago, it brings up a scene from Blackadder.
Field Marshal Haig is most anxious to eliminate all these German spies.
Filthy Hun weasels fighting their dirty underhand war.
Unfortunately, one of our spies...
Splendid fellows, brave heroes, risking life and limb for Blighty.
Anyway, we've largely covered what we know of Tom's personality at that point, and we have to remember, by the way, that moving forward now, we are concentrating on Tom Berenson. We're not talking about Temrash 11111114, and we're not talking about the second Yeerk who is effectively unnamed. Although I think he was named in the TV series. Should we make that canon? Let me know if you think we should make that canon, because he's not named in the book series, so should we take this name he's given from the TV series? The second Yeerk in Tom? Whatever the case, we're talking about Tom Berenson. So the Yeerks, they play a role in this analysis, but we're focusing on the chap, the host, the human Tom Berenson. We've looked at what little personality we can get from him. Let's now look at his relationships with the other characters, starting with the other Animorphs who aren't Jake. The knocking seemed incredibly loud to my dog ears. Jake, you got Homer in there with you? My brother Tom's voice. Mom's on the phone, stop him yapping. He opened the door and stepped in. He looked around, confused. Who are you? He demanded of Tobias. I'm Tobias. I'm a friend of Jake's. Well, where is he? Oh, he's around, Tobias said. I was on the news, and in the newspaper. The headline was, Girl Survives Ordeal Eating Mushrooms. Days went by and there were no sudden attacks. At school, Chapman, the assistant principal and a major controller, ignored me like he always did. Jake's brother, Tom, just made some crack about me and mushrooms, but that was it. So, this is the whole team, huh? Tom nodded. He shook his head ruefully. Crazy cousin Rachel. I always knew you were too much for your own good. Tom seems to have an okay relationship with Jake's friends, so, you know, he makes wisecracks at Cassie, but it's almost in like a good-humoured way. Tobias, who's never seen before, he's more just sort of like, who the hell are you? Like, he doesn't treat him very warmly. He treats him actually quite coldly. And Rachel, he calls her crazy cousin Rachel, which I don't think is the Yeerk speaking. I mean, it is the Yeerk speaking using Tom's mouth, but a lot of times he's probably using references from Tom's own head. So he calls Rachel crazy cousin Rachel, which should imply that Tom himself would have referred to her as crazy cousin Rachel. Maybe not to her face. Oh, hello, crazy Uncle Harold. Yeah, you don't do that to their face. So he probably thinks of Rachel as being a bit of a, whoa, you're a bit crazy. You belong in the what's his name? You belong in the Rupert Kirk facility. That was an AniLysis we did recently. See how I'm linking them together? It's great, isn't it? So I think Tom's probably not very warm to people he doesn't know. Remember, he's got that cool kid vibe, which often means they come across as arrogant sometimes. And yeah, he just sort of looks down on this guy he doesn't know, like, what the hell are you doing? I don't know you. Why are you in my space? With other people he does know, again, he comes across as very confident, very self-assured. Let's now look at his relationship with Jake. The main relationship in this family from our perspective. How is the relationship between Jake and Tom without the Yeerk being there? I'm splitting this into 3 bits, and firstly we're going to look at their relationship as brothers. I love my mum and my dad. I even love my big brother Tom. I had always trusted him. He wasn't like a lot of guys who pound on their younger brother. We were always kind of close, at least until the last year or so. Aha! Aha what? I spun in my chair. It was Tom, sticking his head into my room. On my computer monitor was the article about the French chief. Don't act guilty, I silently ordered myself, but I clicked the window closed anyway. Are you going to tie up that line all night? Tom demanded. Someone might want to make a phone call. It's 10 o'clock anyway. Your bedtime, he said, drawing out the last word. He was playing his role as condescending big brother. I was playing my role too. I had to stop Tom before he got himself in some kind of serious trouble. He was my big brother, and he was supposed to protect me. But that had to go both ways, if he was the one who was in trouble. This sounds like a typical sibling rivalry relationship thing. I have the same with my brother. My brother is 2 years older than me, 1.5. And, you know, we give each other a lot of stick in a good-natured sort of way, but I'd say we got each other's backs in a lot of ways. And I love my brother to bits, honestly. I won't tell him to his face, unless it's like a very, very specific situation. No, I'll call him a graying haired. Well, yeah. I'm sorry. I'm not in my usual quick-witted mode today, so I'm gonna have to consult the swear book. My brother is a piss head, and a total one at that. What are we talking about? He loves his brother, but in a typical brotherly sort of way. He also looks up to his brother. And that is a big thing for Jake, because Tom is not only his brother, he is Jake's hero. I swung my fist and caught Marco in the side of the head. He jumped back and I swung again, but Marco was quick. He dodged my second swing and I slipped and went down. Jake, quit acting like a stupid jerk, he said. I was trying to grab him, but he had me pretty good. Take that back, I yelled. Not likely, Marco said. You think it's just a coincidence he's suddenly interested in what happened at the construction site? They were everywhere. Everywhere. How were we going to stop them? How could we even try? If they could take my own brother from me, if they could take Tom, then how was I going to be able to stop them? It was insane. Marco was right. Swish! The stadium went crazy. Cheering, horns sounding, people chanting my name. And there was Cassie, in the stands, smiling at me. She was sitting with my parents. And there was Tom. He walked out onto the court and threw his arms around me. He patted me on the back. Great game, he said. As usual. End of fantasy. The images disappeared. It's almost like he sees Tom as this infallible being. You know, if something took down Tom, then it must be the biggest thing in the universe to a 13-year-old's mind. You can't take my big brother and I will punch you if you even suggest as much. You can't say that about my big brother, because he would smash him right up. He'd bash him in the shins, he would. And then that bit where he's got it's his fantasy. And his big brother comes down to him and tells him, you had a good game. That's the sort of memory you, for example, right? I like football. I would love it. It would be a fantasy of mine if Jamie Vardy came down to me, or Chris Sutton and said, "You played a great game today." If your hero does that to you, it's like, now I've done it. I've done the thing. Tom is Jake's hero, and it matters a lot. But not only is Tom a brother and a hero to Jake, he's also his friend. You know, Jake, I feel we haven't been hanging around lately. There was no way these guys were aliens. We played some volleyball, me and Tom, together on one team. We ate the barbecue ribs they had. I mean, it was just like this normal, good time. "Hey, midget, what's up?" Tom asked as I sat down. That's one of the things he calls me. Actually, I'm kind of big for my age. Almost as big as Tom. But it's a joke we've had for years. You know how it is. That's one of the things about friendship from my experience. You share in-jokes. You have running gags between yourselves that can last for years. And you never get bored of it because you're sharing it with your friends. And just being able to laugh with each other, being able to get each other laughing is very much a friend thing. And there's more examples of it here. And my mum said she hoped we liked the clothes she'd bought at the mall. And of course, Tom and I joked about how she'd probably shopped at formerly Cool Fashions R Us. It was an old joke we always used whenever my mum bought us clothing. "Yeah?" Tom said, frown fading. "Well, you look pretty stupid. But that's really not unusual, is it?" He was smirking now. "Whatever." I ran up the rest of the stairs and jabbed him in the stomach, the way a little brother would. He fell to the floor, feigning injury, but hooked my foot and tripped me as I walked into my room. We laughed. One thing I found as well is that Tom seems to have a nickname for his little brother Jake. But it only comes in one book, book 53, The Answer, but it happens twice. And I don't think the Yeerk would have come up with this nickname. "They'll carve your sanctimonious face up on Mount Rushmore, Jake boy. You'll be the saviour of the human race. Jake boy." I mean, it's not a very inventive nickname, but it doesn't sound like something the Yeerk would make up. So he's probably gotten that from Tom's memory storage, and is now referring to Jake as Jake boy. Yes, it's not great. Call him Little Twazzock. That's a bit more inventive. But now we're starting to turn to the darker aspect of Tom. And Jake sees that Tom is no longer his brother, his hero, or his friend. Something's changing. I smiled. It was a fake smile, but it was the best I could do. "You used to be faster when you were still in the basketball team. I guess hanging out at the sharing all the time, eating barbecue and potato salad must have slowed your reflexes. You know, in the old days, Tom would not have put up with that. He would not have let me challenge him and get away with it. He would have had me in a headlock and given me a massive nuggie till I begged for mercy. But now, he just gave me a cold, uncertain smile. Maybe it was because he had changed. Maybe it was because I had changed. The silence stretched between us for a few minutes, and my parents, feeling uncomfortable, made small talk. I decided to try one more time. I guess a part of me still refused to believe what Tom was. "Maybe you're just afraid to shoot hoops with me. Maybe I'll kick your butt." "Yeah, that's it. Happy now?" Tom sneered. His gaze met mine. Was there some sign in those eyes? Some evidence of the selfish, evil creature that was controlling him? No. I wish there had been. This is where we're going to take a dark turn in this analysis, where we're going to look at the conflict, the drama. But before I do that, I'm going to throw in some miscellaneous details now that I couldn't really fit in anywhere else. So I'm just going to chuck them at you. First one is, well, we know that Tom drives, but what does he drive? Wherever Tom was going, he'd have to take my mum's car. He wasn't thinking clearly if he thought that I'd cover for that. My dad wasn't home yet, and when he got home, he'd see my mum's car was out. So we know that Tom drives, but this sort of implies that he's not allowed to drive his mum's car, which means he probably drives Steve's minivan. That seems to be the implication we have here. But there's not really much anything else we can say about it. We know that he's pretty good at games, so he must be a regular. We played Dead Zone for a while. Neither of us did very well. Face it, games just weren't all that interesting anymore. My mind was totally not there. Tom came in after a while. "Hey you guys," he said. "Can I give that a try?" It had been some months since Tom had done anything with me like play a game. Sure. Marco moved over and gave Tom his control stick. We played for a few minutes, and Tom did pretty well. The implication is that he hasn't played games for a long time, but probably before he was a controller. He probably had like a PlayStation? Did they have PlayStations around in I don't think they did. It would have been like Sega or something else like that. But he probably played a few games in his time, and so he was pretty good at it, you know. Probably went down to the old arcades as well, down at the mall. But since becoming a controller, it's probably fallen off the radar, much like the basketball. What about weight training? I snatched the videotape out of the VCR. Dad, can I take this over to Marco's and play it for him? It's almost 8. It's dark out, my father objected. Yeah, Tom said. You might get lost and never come back. And that would be such a pity. I'd have to use your room for my weights and stuff. And then you see Tom again. His head is bent over the pool. The same slimy thing slides out of his ear. Immediately he begins to scream. You can't hear the words, but you can imagine. The Hork-Bajir puts a blade to his throat. It takes 3 of them to get him to a cage and throw him inside. He's got weights. I don't think he'd just make that up on the spot while teasing Jake, so he probably... I mean, he does basketball, did basketball. Seems like a pretty well-built guy. And yeah, probably does some weight training. And whether you believe it's canon or not, because it does come from Alternomorphs 1, it takes 3 Hork-Bajir to hoist him back into his cage. So he probably got a lot of strength to him. And I know that Alternomorphs 1 isn't canon. But little details like that, you could argue, say, that detail seems legit, so I'm going to count that as canon. Just that little detail of it taking 3 Hork-Bajir to hoist him into the cage. I'm not saying Alternomorphs 1 is canon. Definitely not. Alternomorphs 2 maybe. So he's got these weights in his room. What's his room like? Looked in my parents' bedroom. In Tom's. In mine. Neat. Except for my room. His bedroom is 2 doors down from mine. That's it. That's all. Our main character, Jake, lives 2 doors down from his brother, a relatively high-ranking Yeerk, and that's all the description we ever get of his room. It's 2 doors away, so that's not even really a description of his room, and an implication that it's neat. There is also a closet in Tom's room, and that's in Meg Must Fall Back to Before, but that's not even quote-worthy. Everyone's got a freaking closet in their room. It's like, I'd put a quote, and his room had a door. Shock horror. Get the quotes up for that. I mean, I'm being comprehensive, but not that comprehensive. Saying that, I have got a quote there of it being 2 doors down, but that's a number thing. That's legit. It's 2 doors down. So what, the bathroom is probably in between Jake and Tom's room? Maybe the parents' room? I don't know. It seems weird that all bedrooms would be on the same side of the house. But then maybe that's just my Britishness coming through. Oh yeah, that's all we get of his room. Nothing, basically. Nothing. What about his voice? Has he got a very high-pitched voice? Or does he have a very low one like this? Let's see what it says. Hello? It wasn't Jake. The voice was gruff and hoarse. It was Tom. So it's more like this then, yeah? Probably not that extreme. No, it's probably, you know, a bit of not gravel. It's weird, isn't it? You got hoarse, gravel, gruff, and they all mean something similar, but not quite the same. So gravelly is like, you got gravel in your throat. Hoarse is similar. It's just, I don't know, but it's gruff and hoarse. And one last one before we move on to the tragedy of Tom is, I mean, what is he? He seems to get high-ranking Yeerks every time. But is he of any significance, really, whatsoever? He wasn't a controller, I said scornfully. Why would the Yeerks want to make a controller out of a punk? They want people in positions of power. We don't know that for sure, Jake said. Tom isn't in a position of power. Tom is just a high school kid. A very confident, self-assured and, you know, well-built high school kid, but he is just a high school kid, which adds to the tragedy of what we're about to talk about. So maybe take a break here, go get yourself a brew, and come back and we'll move on from the basics, the personality, the appearance, his relationship with his brother, and we're going to talk about the Yeerk War and what it does to Tom and by extension his brother Jake. One of the first things that happens in the Animal series, in book 1, narrated by Jake, is Tom. Now, at the very start, Jake thinks Tom is his hero, his brother. But there's been a lot of strange stuff going on. And one major part of this book is Jake realising that his brother is indeed part of this Yeerk invasion that he's been told about by the dying Prince Elfangor. Let's look at some quotes that go over Jake's suspicions and his eventual coming to realise that Tom is indeed a controller. Lately, Tom and I hadn't been hanging out as much. Not like we used to. So I figured, if I got his old position on the team, somehow we just weren't spending as much time together. Partly it was that he was involved in this club called The Sharing. They did all this stuff together, so he was busy a lot of the time. The thing is, Tom should have been the very first person I told about all the stuff that has happened. But as I was sitting there watching him munch toast, I just had this feeling that said, no, this has to be a secret. Even from Tom. I didn't make the team, I said. What team? He asked. He looked puzzled. What team? The basketball team. Your old team. Oh, too bad, he said. Too bad? I repeated. I cannot believe how little he seemed to care. It's just sports, he said. He munched another big bite of toast. Just sports? I couldn't stop repeating what he said. Tom saying sports were no big deal? No way. He lived for sports. Yeah, I guess I just don't have your total skill. He shrugged. Well, I quit the team anyway, a couple of days ago. I practically fell off my chair. You quit? You quit the team? And you didn't even talk to me about it? What's the deal? I didn't say anything about it because I knew you and Dad would make a big thing of it. Look, there are more important things than throwing balls through hoops, he said. He had this mysterious look in his eyes. I figured he meant girls were the more important thing. Besides, he added, we do much cooler stuff at The Sharing. Maybe you should join up. I was stunned. Obviously, Tom and I were further apart than I had realised. Tom looked down at me. There was a strange smell about him. My dog brain couldn't quite identify it. It was an unsettling, dangerous smell. And somehow, in my own mind, I heard the echo of a laugh. A very human laugh I had heard the night before as Visser 3 swallowed the Andalite whole. It doesn't quite dawn on Jake what could potentially be happening here. He doesn't add 2 and 2 here. He's just been told of this alien invasion, that there's these Yeerk parasitic beings taking people's bodies, and Tom just hasn't been acting himself recently. Suddenly he's quit the basketball team, and he's not hanging out with Jake anymore, and he just seems so off. And it's Marco, Mr. A to B, who quickly puts those 2 puzzle pieces together. Catch you guys later, and don't forget, let me know if you hear anything about those kids at the construction site. He left. Marco looked at me. Jake? He's one of them. What? Tom? Tom is one of them. Your brother is a controller. This is the part where Jake punches Marco for suggesting such a terrible thing. And yet there are doubts that come into Jake's mind. He suddenly, even though he struck Marco because of this, because of how angry he was and how betrayed he felt that his friend would suggest such a terrible thing, part of him thinks maybe he's right. And then when they're at a sharing event, he speaks to Tom, and this is what we see. The sharing can do all kinds of things for you once you're a full member. How do you get to be a full member? I asked. He smiled mysteriously. Oh, that will come later. First you become an associate member. Later, the leaders will decide whether to ask you to become a full member. Once you become a full member, the whole world changes. At that moment, something weird happened. I was looking at Tom, and he was smiling at me. But then his face kind of twitched. his head started to pull to one side, like he was trying to shake his head, only he couldn't quite do it. For just a split second, there was a look in his eyes. Scared or something. He was looking right at me, and it was like some different person, some scared person, was looking out of those same eyes. Then he was back to normal. Or what looked like normal. Okay, he said. I admit it, I was wrong. These are just normal people having a good time, and Tom is not a controller. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Marco was wrong. I knew what I had seen in Tom's eyes. He was trying to warn me. Somehow he had managed to gain control of his face for just a second before the Yeerk in his head had crushed him. Tom, the real Tom, not the Yeerk slug in his brain, had tried to warn me. It's at this point where we firmly establish that Tom is indeed a controller. At the sharing meeting at the beach. So Marco's the one to initially say it, and then they all go to the beach, hang out there with the sharing, and they come out at the end of it, and Marco, who hasn't seen anything suspicious, says, I don't see anything going on here, so I suppose it's just the sharing meeting, so I was probably wrong. But Jake has seen Tom do something that Chapman did in book 2, and it's not something we saw much at all after books 1 and 2, which is very strange. This idea of a host rebellion. We did see it a couple of times, but not as frequently as it did at the start of the series. So Tom is talking to Jake like, change your world, and then suddenly it's that sort of thing. Just enough. It's actually quite detailed that it's not just a very subtle like eye twitch or anything like that. It's something like that, as if Tom is momentarily taking control. He's suddenly just boom attached the Yeerk with his psyche, and that split second gets a little bit of control over something, and that's what tips Jake off, because Jake knows his brother, and he knows that his brother doesn't twitch all the time probably, so he saw that and thought that was weird, that wasn't normal, and that's what tells Jake everything he needs to know. Later down the line we get some memories from Tom, because Tom's old Yeerk takes over Jake's head in book 6, and there's a bit of a memory dump moment, and we actually see how Tom became this controller. Let's have a look at that. He had joined the sharing for a simple, silly reason. A pretty girl he liked was a member. He had wanted to get close to her. He had gone to the meetings. He'd played along with them, never guessing the truth. All he cared about was the girl. He had stumbled accidentally into a secret leadership meeting. He thought the girl was seeing another boy, but she was one of them. He had followed her, wandered into the meeting and seen Visser 3. Visser 3 in his Andalite body. I saw the controllers grab a yelling, punching, kicking Tom. I saw as they tied him up, carried him through secret passageways to the great underground Yeerk pool. I saw him scream as he realised what was happening. I felt his fear. I felt his rage as the Yeerk slug crawled into his ear and wrapped itself around his brain. I felt every ounce of his despair. Just so we're clear, at this point, we know pretty damn certain that Tom is not a voluntary controller. And this is just the quote to prove that. I hesitated before asking. I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. Is he in the cages? Or is he voluntary? He's in a cage, Tobias said. He's yelling his brains out at the Hutbajir guards. Yes. I knew Tom would never have gone voluntarily. I knew they must have taken him kicking and punching. The entire time of the series, Tom is an involuntary host, so at no point is he saying, right, okay, I'll be voluntary now. He started the sharing because of a girl, which, again, it's typical teen stuff. So he's chasing this girl around. She says, I'm part of the sharing. He's like, yeah, I'm cool with that. You know, I'll come down to the sharing and have a good time with you. And they go down to the sharing. They have the good time playing ping pong or whatever have you. And then she eventually, in one of these meetings, one of these sharing sessions, goes to the leadership meeting. And maybe she's doing this every single time. And Tom's getting suspicious because maybe she's hanging around with another bloke, you know, typical teenage boy jealousy. And he sees her with this other bloke, and eventually he decides, right, I'm going to kick down the freaking door and I'm going to give him a piece of my mind. Oh, look, a centaur, priorities. But they don't let him, you know, decide what's priority is. They just take him, chuck him in the Yeerk pool, and get him infested. And there you go. That's how he ended up as a controller. And the big problem with Tom being a controller is, of course, the fact that he shares a house with the leader of the AniLysis bandits. Tom, Jake's brother, could listen in on an extension and overhear something we didn't want him to hear. He can overhear what's going on in Jake's room. He can intercept the phone lines, as that quote illustrated there. They can't use Jake's house for anything. And not only that, but Jake is probably under constant guard, because at any point he could think to himself, oh, Tom could just like drag me down to the Yeerk pool now. Or he could order people to come in and take me or my parents. For the whole near enough the whole series, that is the threat in the background. What I will say at the end of this video is that actually I think that was a very underused thing, unfortunately. But that is the state of affairs. So who was the Yeerk that infested Tom? When he was taken down to that Yeerk pool and infested, who did he get? Well, we can assume it's Temrash 114. Unless he was later moved into Tom's host, but that's never explained, so we can just take the most parsimonious route and say that it is Temrash. Now, who is Temrash? Who is this Yeerk in control of Tom? Well, he's actually a bit of an up-and-comer. Okay, look, I've learned something. For one thing, Tom is getting more important to the Yeerks. I think now he's just below Chapman as a controller. Tom was the only one from the meeting who went with Visser 3, aside from his guards. Tom was acting sort of careful around Visser 3, but he looked like he was pretty cocky around the guards. It's hard to say, Jake, but if I had to guess, I'd say Tom and Visser 3 are tight. There's this whole thing with a hospital or some sort of care centre, I can't quite remember the name of it. But Temrash is a big player in this scheme in Book 6. And what eventually happens is, he's in a portable Yeerk pool inside this hospital thing, this facility. And Jake eventually falls into that Yeerk pool. And so Temrash crawls into Jake's ear, and this is where he explains who he is. I am Temrash 114, the Yeerk said proudly. I've been promoted. No doubt you are happy for me. Do you know what my last host was? Who it was? The Yeerk taunted. Shut up! Shut up! Stop talking to me! Go away! It wasn't real. It couldn't be real. It was Tom, of course, your brother. I'm the Yeerk who controlled your brother. The Yeerk laughed in my head. You're even stupider than your brother. No, your brother's body's been given to a new Yeerk, someone with a lower rank. I'm too important now to be wasted on Tom. I'm to take on a new and important project. A very special host. The governor. Tom's Yeerk was the one that had gone into this portable pool. Whether it was just him or there was a bunch of others, it's untold, really. He goes in there because he's been transferred into the state governor. So Temrash is a very powerful Yeerk. Whether he's a sub-visser, we're never told. And there is some strange goings on with sub-vissers and all that regarding Tom's Yeerks. But anyway, he's been transferred to a new host, which means that the Yeerk who's in control of, we can assume, Tom from the moment he was infested up to Book 6 is now no longer in the picture. Long story short, Temrash eventually dies and Jake remains free. But that's a story for another AniLysis. We're now moving on. And very, very quickly, Tom is reinfested with another Yeerk. You were a total pig, Tom said. Chicken, corn, potatoes. Or as you kept saying, potatoes, toes, tatoes. I thought you'd gone nuts. And were you suspicious, Yeerk? I thought, looking at my brother. A new Yeerk was in Tom's head. Another arrogant master of the galaxy. Temrash suggested that this new Yeerk was of a lower rank. But as the series progresses, and let's just add in there, it's a while before Tom really becomes relevant again. It's only until Book 31, which we can assume in within the series, within the universe, it's probably about a year, just over a year away, probably maybe closer to 2, he becomes important as well. In fact, he becomes so important that the Yeerks get very, very desperate when he's in trouble. They were going to pull a drive-by. It was insane. A shooting in broad daylight? Just how important was Tom to the Yeerks? This was reckless. By the end of the series, this Yeerk, who, as I've mentioned, is entirely unnamed in the book series, unfortunately. You know, it'd have been nice to tie a name to this big player. By the end of the series, this is his role. He's been elevated to security chief for all Yeerk forces on Earth. It's at this point in the series where Tom, or Tom Controller, does become a major player after being semi-absent for a long stretch of time. Because he's been working back up the ranks, this new Yeerk, he's been working up the ranks. He's now the chief, the security chief on Earth. And yet he isn't even a sub-visor. And we know that because he says as much later on. We will get onto that. And I just find it very strange that, and not even a sub, that we see other sub-visors like around, and not, there isn't a sub-visor who's in charge of security. No, I don't understand how it works, honestly. By the end of the series, this new Yeerk is turning traitor, and he plans to be the new leader of the Yeerks going forward. He's going to betray Visser 1, betray the Council of 13, because he had the morphing power by the end, and he felt that power and thought, I'm going to be the new big boss. Tom betrayed his Visser, betrayed the Yeerk race, not for the sake of poor old humanity, but for his own ambition. He would escape with the morphing cube, and with a hard core of faithful Yeerk supporters, he would abandon the Yeerk people to the Andalite vengeance, destroy the hated Animorphs, and if Homo sapiens was annihilated too, well, this is about as far as it goes as far as Tom-centric stuff takes us. So we've covered the 2 different Yeerks that he's had to a limited degree, because I'm not going into full detail, of course, because it's not their AniLysis. This is the Tom Berenson AniLysis. We've covered the 2 Yeerks, we've covered how he's become a controller. And now it's a case of, how does it affect Jake? Because that is largely Tom's role in this series. We don't really get much more from him. We will do a full series recap at the end of this, but for now, let's look at how this all affects Jake, because that is Tom's purpose in the series. Let's firstly look at how he is a motivating factor for Jake, how Tom, being a controller, inspires Jake to take on this war, to do the things that he does. We aren't saying anything. We are forgetting everything we saw. We are getting on with our normal lives. And leave Tom the way he is, I demanded. No way. Never. He's my brother. I'm going to save him. I tried not to think about the spider in my stomach, or the fact that it was still not completely dead. I tried not to think about the fact that part of my body was back on the floor, jerking like it was still alive. I just raced along after Chapman, because Chapman might reveal something that would help Tom. Look, I said, I'm not asking anyone else to go with me, but I don't have a choice. I heard that scream today, and I know Tom is down there tonight. He's my brother. I have to try and save him. I held out my hands, helpless. I have to do it. For Tom. Not only is he the inspiration for Jake here, he's also an essential ingredient in what keeps Marco in the fold too. Marco looked sick. He gave me a dirty look. He shook his head. This is bad, he said. This is so bad. If it wasn't for Tom, I'd walk away. Look, Marco, you don't have to, I started to say. Oh, shut up, he snapped. You're my best friend, you jerk. Like I'm going to let you go face all this alone? I'm in. I'm in to rescue Tom. That's it. Then I'm done. The very fabric of the Animorphs team is held together because of Tom at the very beginning. If it weren't for the fact that Tom was a controller, not only would Jake maybe not have gotten involved, but Marco certainly wouldn't have been involved. Basically, they wouldn't have even got started. Maybe Tobias would, but he would go solo and he's basically useless, so he'd die instantly. And yeah, the animals just wouldn't be a thing. The fact that Tom is a controller is what eventually, domino effect, saves humanity. And that's all because he gave Jake the motivation he needed to take on this task that Elfangor had given him. He inspired Jake to do that because Jake wanted to save his hero, his brother, his friend. It was because of that the animals took the first journey down to the Yeerk pool. The plan was set to attack the Yeerk pool and rescue Tom. The whole point of going down there in book 1, that set everything off, was specifically to rescue Tom. That was the whole reason for them going down there. It wasn't to be explorative or curious. They wanted him, this chap. And then Jake almost causes the game to be over straight away. Marco began ripping at a lock on one of the cages. The lock gave way. The door flew open. Tom was the first out. He looked scared and mad and determined. I was going to send him a thought message, telling him who I was, but suddenly there was Rachel screaming in my head. "Jake!" Rachel said. "Look, Cassie!" If it weren't for Rachel screaming at Jake, Jake would have spoken to Tom, who would have then been recaptured, and it would have ended pretty much everything straight away at the start. Thank God Rachel was on point to interrupt there. But that's how desperate Jake was. He was willing to speak directly to Tom to try to guide him out of the Yeerk pool. Of course, he doesn't escape the Yeerk pool and gets reinfested with, again, we assume, Temrash. The animals don't go back to the Yeerk pool again because they've seen the odds. They've seen how bad it is down there. But they don't give up hope, especially Jake. And in book 6, when he gets Temrash in his head and gets seed all the memories of Tom, as we discussed earlier, gets a lot of Tom memories, he sees things from Tom's perspective. And he feels how Tom feels under this Yeerk control. And at the end of the book, and the TV series did this part relatively well, he called Tom using a phone that could disguise him. And this is what was said. He picked it up on the 3rd ring. "Yeah?" "I have a message," I said in a thick, twisted voice that did not sound at all like me. "What?" Tom asked. "Don't give up, Tom. Don't ever give up." I hung up before he could say anything. "Do you think Tom, the real Tom, heard it?" Rachel asked. "He heard," I answered. I wondered if he would have the strength to hold on. But I knew the answer. See, a part of my brother was in my own mind now, along with echoes of a long-dead Hawk-Bajir and a simple Ged. And yes, even a bit of a Yeerk with dreams of glory. Jake still has hope that Tom can be saved, and he takes a risk to speak to Tom to give him that little bit of hope as well. Whether it worked or not, we can't be too sure at this point. But the next time we really see Tom is in book 31, The Conspiracy. It's a very important book. I tried to imagine life without Tom, without my older brother. I'd be an only child. Marco was an only child, so were Cassie and Tobias. But I wasn't, and I didn't want to be. Saving Tom was the reason I'd agreed to be an Animorph. I hadn't wanted it, any of it. But then I'd learned the Yeerks had taken Tom and made him one of their own. It was for him that I'd endured that first horrifying morph. It was to save him that I'd gone down into the Yeerk pool, that unsuspected house of horrors. I wasn't going to lose Tom to the Yeerks. I had to keep that hope alive. But I had to keep my father alive, too. The Yeerk in Tom's head was locked in battle with me, though he didn't know it. We were deadly enemies on the field of battle, where 2 innocent people, my brother and my father, stood directly in our line of fire. This, I believe, is the book where things start to turn. Up to this point, Jake has a solid belief that he can save Tom, and he wants to save Tom above anything else. This is the book where he realises that it's probably not going to go that way, because now his father's in the line of fire as well, and it's between Tom and his father. And this is part of Jake's great conflict that comes with his brother being a controller. And that's what we're going to cover now. We've looked at the motivation. Now we're going to look at Jake's inner conflict. And this, just like the motivation, starts all the way back in book 1. And as per normal, It's brought up by Marco. We're pretty sure the cop is a controller. And I don't care what you say, Jake, I think Tom is too. So here's the deal. You want to get into this fight against the Yeerks? Marco asked me. Fine. Let's see how much you want to do it when it turns out it's your own brother you have to destroy. That stopped me cold. It's not exactly some video game, is it? Marco said. This is reality. You don't know anything about reality, Jake. Nothing bad has ever really happened to you. You have this perfect family, like I used to have. The Andalite gave us the morphing power for a reason. It wasn't just for fun or being a dog or a horse or a bird. He hoped we would fight. Then maybe Tom is the enemy, Marco said. Maybe it's your own brother you'll end up destroying. Yes, I said. My throat felt all tight. Maybe that's what will happen, maybe not. But the first step is to find out more. And I think maybe the way we do it is to check out this meeting of the sharing. Tonight. I'll call the others. Anyone wants to come? Cool. You want to stay out of it, Marco? That's cool too. Straight away, Marco says to Jake, this could end up in you killing your brother. And Jake is initially shocked, but even by the end of the book, he understands that that is a possibility, and he doesn't shy away from that. However, he does still keep the hope. By the time book 6 comes along, and they figure out that Tom is tied to this hospital mission that the Yeerks have gone on, then we get this conflict coming up again. Are you worried about Tom getting hurt? Cassie asked. Count on Cassie to figure it out. I looked down at the ground. Look, he's my brother. You guys are my friends. What if we get into it and it comes down to a fight? Marco raised his eyebrows thoughtfully. He understood. We don't hurt Tom. That's the first thing. It's not that simple, I said. He's involved in this big time. He's one of them. And he would... Look, he would kill any of us. I hated having to say that, but it was true. Not Tom, Tobias said. That thing that lives in his head. Never Tom. Rachel whistled softly. If we succeed, Tom fails. If he fails, Visser 3 may kill him. That's about the way it is, yeah, I said. So what do we do? Marco asked. We forget this mission, Cassie suggested, and leave the Yeerks in control of a hospital. A little factory for making controllers, I countered. Why? Because my brother may be hurt? Yes, Cassie said simply. I hesitated. I wanted to agree. But how could I justify backing off for selfish reasons? Jake is beginning to understand the idea of sacrifice. He has a brother who he loves and adores, and it's his best mate, is his hero. But by the time book 6 comes along, he's very, very aware that it's selfish to say that he doesn't want to risk his brother getting hurt if it means risking other people. He's realised that by this point, and it only builds further and further. So we get the gap between book 6 and book 31 where Tom isn't really relevant. And this is the state of mind that Jake is in book 31. I know how the guys fighting in the Civil War felt, North against South, brother against brother, living with the dark, ugly fact that if you met your brother on the battlefield, he would kill you, unless you killed him first. We're seeing from book 1 up to book 31, Jake having this hope for Tom, to book 6 where he's considering, do I take on this mission if it endangers my brother, all the way up to book 31 where he's effectively saying, that's how it is. That's war. And that's the transition there that Jake has gone through. But I want to reverse momentarily back to book 6 again, because there's an important part here, and I believe this is actually important to how things conclude in the whole series regarding Tom. It was as if a third mind had joined us. It was real, so completely real, not like a vision or a movie or something. I felt this. I felt it exactly as if I were there. My brother's mind, his thoughts, his memories as clear as if I was seeing them myself. Tom. Some piece of Tom that the Yeerk still carried with him. It was from just a few days earlier. He was sitting at the breakfast table across from me. It was just as I remembered it, except that now I felt Tom's emotions, not mine. The real Tom, the true Tom, who was crushed beneath the Yeerk's control. He was crying, sobbing, helplessly, silently. "Not Jake," he cried. "Leave Jake alone. Leave my brother alone. Look, I'll never trouble you again. I swear it. Just leave Jake alone." The Yeerk waited while the full impact of direct contact with Tom's mind sank into my own. Tom was defeated, desperate. He spent his time wishing he could die. He had given up any hope of escape. Given up. "That's how it always is," the Yeerk said. "At first the host fights, or at least tries. But hour after hour, and day after day, they see that they cannot rule their own bodies. The host sees that no one even knows what has happened to him. No one knows he is lost in his own head, and over time hope dies. The host becomes a faint, shattered creature, like your brother." The Yeerk was telling the truth. That was what made it so terrible. It was true. I could feel Tom's complete, utter despair. I could feel that he had accepted defeat. I knew that all he wished for now was an end. Jake is the only one, of course, of the animals to see this. He sees the extent to which Tom has given up, to the point where he'd rather die. And this is why I think it's important, because Jake will clearly remember this. That memory is now part of him, and he actually feels, as if he were living that memory, feels the hopelessness that Tom has, and he takes that forward. If Tom, for example, in this memory had shown signs that he was so hopeful that he thought, "I'm going to do this, I'm going to be saved, Jake is going to be there and we're going to work as a team and I still believe we can escape," then maybe Jake wouldn't have taken the actions he did later in the series. Maybe he'd still desperately tried to find a way to rescue Tom without having to kill him or have him killed. But seeing that Tom would accept that Tom was accepting death over being a controller, that is probably what influences or helps to influence some of Jake's decision going forward. And in the end, Jake considers this his responsibility. This had to be my decision. Tom was my brother. This was my family, my brother, the killer, my father, the target, and me, the fool in the middle, just the three of us. If my brother, Tom, in a desperate last-ditch attempt to save himself, tried to kill my father, then I would morph. And the last thing my brother would see was me, his brother, his unknown enemy, rear up and destroy him with all the ruthless, savage power that was mine to command. I had told myself that I would do whatever had to be done, and I would. Suddenly, I needed to talk to Cassie, and maybe, when it was all over, I would. This is Jake in full self-sacrifice mode. I would do this thing, and I'd like to speak to Cassie about it after I've done it. I'm not going to bother, talking it through with her, because I know what she'll say. I'm going to leave it for after. And of course, that's a foreshadowing, effectively, of what happens at the end of the series, because he never tells Cassie what his plan is until after it's been put in place. And it's great. It's brilliant storytelling. This is Jake truly becoming a leader. Someone who understands his boundaries and also knows his responsibilities. Who knows what he has to do, what he has to sacrifice of himself in order to achieve what he needs to achieve. And this all ties into a dream. Before we move on to the next area of discussion, let's look at the dream. This started all the way back in book 6, and it goes a little something like this. I sighed. I had this dream. I almost stopped talking right there, because I felt like a fool bringing it up. I know this is stupid. I know dreams don't mean anything, but I've had this dream a couple of times. So, tell us, Rachel prodded. Okay, but don't laugh. In the dream I'm in my tiger morph, and I'm stalking Tom, following him, on his trail. I'm feeling the tiger's eagerness. You know, that predator feeling, the hunger, the desire to kill. Anyway, in the dream, I'm hunting my own brother. Only when I get close, he turns around, and it isn't Tom anymore, it's... I stopped myself before I finished the sentence. I'd already said too much. In the dream, I was the tiger, moving with perfect silence, each muscle like liquid steel, every movement controlled, calculated. I could smell my prey. I could hear his clumsy human movements in the dark forest. He was slow. He was weak. He could not escape me. I would destroy him. I would bring down my prey. My prey? Tom. I saw him turn to look at me. I saw fear in his eyes. Fear of me. I settled back on my haunches, preparing for the final lunge, the killing lunge that would end with my teeth sinking into his neck, my jaws crushing his spine. He looked at me and held up his hands. No! I leapt, uncoiling unbelievable power. I leapt, a huge, unstoppable hunter. I roared, a thunderous cry of triumph that could be heard for miles. And then I saw the tiger, saw myself, saw orange striped fur and ruthless yellow eyes and saber teeth and claws that could rip open a buffalo hurtling toward me. Tom had become the tiger, and I was his prey. My fear was justified. I did dream. The same dream I'd had before. I was the tiger. Tom was my prey. We were in the dark, deep woods, and I was hunting him with all my tiger skill. He was stumbling and noisy and weak. I knew I would take him. At last, too tired to run any further, Tom fell. He waited, helpless, while I gathered the power of my tiger body and prepared to leap. And then I was no longer the tiger. I was my own prey. I watched through eyes wide with terror as the tiger sprang. Interesting dream, the Yeerk said. Very metaphorical. Jake is having this repeated dream of himself as the tiger attacking his brother. But at the very last moment it switches. And suddenly Jake is Tom and Tom is the tiger. What I do find irritating is that this exact same trope was replayed in 23, the Pretender, where Tobias is coming down to a rabbit and then suddenly Tobias sees himself as the rabbit, and yeah, that was I didn't like that. But here it's fine. This is the original, and the original's always the best. And at least this was a dream and not Tobias being weird, you know. At least I think that wasn't a dream. Yeah, Tobias is a weird one, isn't he? I can't wait for his analysis. What does this dream mean? I think we've covered some of it so far, but I thought this was the best place to put the dream section. I think it's all about Jake coming to terms with the fact that it's him or his brother. It's one of the two. Somebody's going to die. Somebody's going to die, and it could be one of them's going to do it to the other. Jake is either going to get Tom killed, or Tom is going to get him killed. That's effectively what it comes down to. I don't think there's too much more to it than that. Although it does foreshadow something that happens in book 50. Spoiler alert, Jake chases Tom in the woods as a tiger, so it's almost a literal happening. But the details are different and things do happen differently. But it is almost a foreshadowing of what eventually would come to pass. But it also is metaphorical in the sense that, you know, Jake can very well jump at Tom to kill him, but it could turn out to be the other way around and Tom is the one pouncing on him. Later on in the series, there's another dream sequence that is pretty closely tied to this one, I believe. And it comes in The Familiar, which was, let's face it, one big dream sequence. 10 years ago tonight, Tom put it all together. He came into your room and murdered the leader of the animals. Rather than let Vista 3 know that one of the notorious Andalite bandits had gone undetected for so long, right under his nose, Tom ended your life. your own brother. I think this ties into Jake's earlier dream with the tiger in the woods. Because at this point, Jake is... I mean, 41 was a big book for Jake, wasn't it? It's where we see him confronted with all these decisions and all the things he's done and all the things he has to do going forward. And it's just a reminder to him almost that it's still going to be you or Tom. One of you's got to go. And if he leaves it too long, then Tom may well come into his room and kill him. Just as Tobias said happened during this whole dream sequence. And I think it's just a little add-on, which I find very fun. I love book 41, it's great. Moving on. Let's now go into the final section of this video. We've basically done the majority of this analysis. But now we're going to go through the series step by step. We're going to look at each major action in Tom's story and just go through it and connect all the dots. Using what we know so far. The things we've discussed so far, we're going to use what we know and we're going to make those connections from how Tom is just a random controller at the sharing at the start at book 1 all the way to attempted coup in book 54 and his death. How do we get from Tom in book 1 to his demise? Let's begin. We've covered a lot of what happened in the invasion, the very first book of the series. And we know that the animals go down to the Yeerk pool in order to rescue Tom. And they do break him out of the cages. We've covered that much so far. But this is where Tom's bravery really comes in. Because he and a bunch of other hosts and the animals are rushing to the exit. We were trapped. Fire ahead. Visser 3 himself behind. No! I heard a familiar voice say. No, you filthy creep. You aren't going to win this time. It was Tom. All alone, he charged at Visser 3, armed with nothing but his fists. One of the Visser's arms came down and swung at him. Tom! I cried. My tiger body roared with all its might, but the sound was lost in the noise of crying humans and whistling Taxons. I saw Tom stagger from the Visser's blow. I saw him fall from the edge of the stairs. I went a little crazy. I was on the Visser before I knew what was happening. On him, digging my claws into his flesh. I twisted up and behind one of his 8 heads. The tiger in me knew what to do. I sank my teeth into his neck and clamped my powerful jaws and held on. Visser 3 is in his 8-legged, 8-tentacle, 8-headed monster. And that one does come back later on, and it is relevant here. But what happens is, this monster is chasing them all upstairs, and Tom, being the brave, but probably quite stupid sod that he is, turns around and starts to fight this monster. Perhaps in an effort to save the other people, to provide a distraction, which is a very self-sacrificial thing for him, and something that Jake could possibly aspire to. Spoiler alert, he pretty much does. And that's where we leave it. He falls back into the Yeerk pool and Tom is recaptured. And shortly after this event, the Animorphs decide that it's best not to try it again. If they make too many connections to Tom, make him stand out too much, then he could very well be killed. So we find another way to get at them, I said. We can follow Tom again when it's time for his Yeerk to return to the Yeerk pool. Yeerks have to go to the pool every 3 days. They drain out of their hosts' heads and soak up Chondrona rays. No, we leave Tom out of it, Jake said firmly. If we call attention to him in any way, the Yeerks may decide he's trouble for them. They may decide to kill him. In between this and the next quote, Tom changes Yeerk, so Temrash leaves, perishes after taking control of Jake temporarily, and Tom has a new Yeerk. The next time he's relevant to the plot, the next time we see progress, is when Jake confronts Axe about not telling him what would happen if they destroyed the Chondrona. They're going to kill every host whose Yeerk dies, aren't they? Prince Jake asked bitterly. Every human controller whose Yeerk dies is going to be eliminated. That's true, isn't it? Yes. Prince Jake's face showed an expression. I believe it was an expression of sickness. We did this, Prince Jake said. It's war, I said. My brother, Prince Jake said. Tom. He's a controller. What about him? I had no answer. The Yeerks would save as many as they could, But if their emergency system was breaking down, they would do what had to be done. They would eliminate any evidence. Prince Jake was staring at me. You knew they would do this. I glared back at him. Maybe it was the human adrenaline in my system, but I was becoming angry now. Angry at the accusing look in Prince Jake's eyes. Yes, I knew. How did you know? I hesitated. Prince Jake did not like my hesitation. He suddenly wheeled around and pushed me against the wall. How did you know the Yeerks would do this? Whether future Jake, 2001 Jake, end of series Jake, would agree with younger Jake here is up for speculation. But he's very much still in the mindset of, you endangered my brother, that's the bad thing, that's not what we do. We don't want to do that. Whereas later series Jake might have seen it differently. Destroying the Kandrona, causing the potential loss of human host life, as well as Yeerk life. But at this time, at book 8 of the series, he gets absolutely riled up, knowing that his brother could have been affected by his actions, and Axe didn't even tell them that that was the case. So he's still very protective about his brother at this stage. We then fast forward, because Tom doesn't really do much between book 6 really, and book 31. So we go all the way forward to the conspiracy, where Jake is very much a different person. He was framed in our living room window. His eyes burned with rage. He'd have killed me, too. He would have had my dad gunned down, and if I had gotten in the way, and that wasn't the worst of it. Worse was knowing that my brother, Tom, my true brother, had been trapped inside his own mind, trapped watching as the killers prepared to murder his family, helpless, watching, unable to open his mouth to shout a warning. I was clenching the hose so tightly the water was petering out, but I couldn't relax the muscles. Could not. I don't know how this war will turn out. Don't know if we'll win or lose, or even somehow compromise and make peace. But I know one thing. I will kill the Yeerk who has done this to my brother. I will kill him. The Yeerks have just had an attempt at Steve Berenson's life, Jake and Tom's father. And it was a drive-by shooting, and Tom was watching from the window, watching it unfold, calling ahead to the Yeerks to say that he was outside, ready to be murdered. This is where Jake really does see that, if he doesn't deal with his brother, really bad things can happen. Not only to him, but his family too. This book 31 is where I do believe we see the change. Tom's Yeerk is about to murder Jake's father, Tom's father, at the dock at Grandpa G's cabin. He's got a Nazi dagger hidden, and he's sitting by Steve Berenson, the father, on this dock in the middle of the night, overlooking this lake. But the other animals swoop in when it's least expected. They proper Deus Ex Machina it just before Jake tries to get involved. He's watching from the back, and they break the pier, and Steve and Tom fall into the water, and the Animorphs start to give his shins a bit of a bashing. Quite literally, they break Tom's leg and he can't swim, and they give him a good old pounding, and he falls unconscious in the water. Tom was floating face down, motionless in the water. My father would never get there in time to save him. I could. The tiger can swim. I could save him. But I didn't move. Frozen. Brain locked around the simple fact that if Tom died, he would at last be free. That if the Yeerk died, I would have my revenge. That we would be safer, stronger, freer with the controller named Tom dead and gone. Didn't know what to do. Tom would drown unless I saved him. Saving him might still mean my father's death. Help me! I wanted to scream. Tell me what to do! The lake water rippled, surged, and suddenly Tom's limp, unconscious body was skimming across the water like a surfboard, being pushed rapidly towards shore. I ran to the water's edge. My reflection in the moonlit ripples was human. Panting, I dragged Tom's body up onto the land. Jake very clearly hesitates, and he's not going to go in and save Tom, which would leave Tom to drown. Jake was willingly letting his brother die. Until the Animorphs decided to take matters into their own hands, and they saved Tom, giving Jake no choice but to finish dragging him out of the water and making sure he's okay. Go back to the first 10 books of the series. Would Jake, of that particular era of books, would he have hesitated? I think the answer would definitely be no, he wouldn't have. But this far into the series, knowing all that he knows, seeing the dreams that he's dreamed, he will not save Tom, because he knows that it's better for their chances to win the war going forward. It's a major turning point for Jake. A major turning point. This is where he becomes fully self-sacrifice mode. Like Tom in book 1 going after Visser 3's monster, making the self-sacrifice for the betterment of the people behind him. This, though, is where we actually get an insight into the real Tom. For only the second and the last time, I believe, in the series, Tom seems to speak his own mind. Something was wrong with his leg. There was a hinge where there shouldn't be one. I think your leg is broken. I looked down at Tom. Inside his head was a killer. He'd almost killed my father. But what I saw, the eyes I looked into, those belonged to my big brother. I settled into the mud next to him. His face was white and tight with shock. His eyes filled with dark agony. His teeth were chattering and tears leaked down into his hair. "Get out of here, midget," he gasped, writhing. "Get out of here and leave me alone." "No," I said, moving closer. "I don't think so." And I didn't, until I heard a deep pulsing thwack, 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 and a medevac helicopter dropped out of the starry sky and swept Tom away. "Your mum says they medevaced Tom all the way back to the hospital back home," my father said, plopping down in a chair. "It seems he has quite a complex break and our hospital's the only one in the area equipped to deal with it." "No kidding," I said, not at all surprised. "Of course, back home. Back where there were plenty of controllers around to make absolutely certain Tom would have access to the Yeerk pool's life-saving drone arrays. He's in some pain and he'll be laid up for a while, but at least he's going to be okay," my father said thickly. He reached over and hugged me. "Thank God you got there in time to save him, Jake." This is quite a hard-hitting moment. It could be harder hitting, but for what it is, it's a very good moment. Of course, Tom survives, he goes home, back to the hospital, but it's the part where he speaks to Jake, or seems to speak to Jake, and it's very heavily implied that it is the real Tom. What does he say to Jake? He doesn't say, "Help me," or "Do this," or anything else. He just says, "Leave me alone, get out of here." This is the true Tom speaking through, for only the second time. The first time he ever spoke was when he yelled at Visser 3 in book 1. This is the only time he ever directly speaks to Jake throughout the whole series, and he tells Jake to leave. Tom has completely given up at this point, and Jake had seen his memories before from all the way back in book 6. Even more time has passed and he'd given up by that point, and now he's at the point where he doesn't even want Jake to, he doesn't want Jake around. He won't, yeah, he's done. It's a last attempt to save Jake, to say to Jake basically, get out of here while you can, because maybe he suspects somebody will be coming for him, or the Yeerk will retake control and do something to Jake. Tom doesn't want to mess around. He just says, get out of here now. But Jake doesn't. He sticks by his brother's side until the helicopter comes along. Tom then disappears again for a bit, obviously to recuperate with his broken leg, because next time we see him, he's walking okay. So he recovers from that eventually. It was quite quick, really, wasn't it? Because the broken leg doesn't heal that quickly. But yeah, the next time we hear about him is the Droid, giving us a little bit of foreshadowing in Megamorphs 4, Back to Before, the bingo book. "How long till your cousin Rachel loses her grip? You know the darkness is growing inside her. How long till Tobias dies? A bird, a bird! How can he ever be happy? How long till Marco is forced to destroy his own controller mother? Will he survive that, do you think? How long, Jake, till you kill Tom? Then what dreams will come, Jake the Yeerk killer? Not everything the droid says comes to pass. The most glaring example is Marco killing his own mother when she's a controller, which does not happen unless sometime in the future the Yeerks return and she's retaken and Marco kills her then. But we're not going to go for that. That's fan fiction territory. But Jake does, spoiler alert, end up killing Tom. Indirectly, but it is his doing. And so the droid was right there, right with that one. And then he says, what dreams will come then, Jake? I think this is an implication for, or referring to the dreams we've previously discussed, where he's chasing Tom through the woods, and saying, your dreams are all about one of you killing the other, so when you've killed Tom, then what are you going to dream about? As if these are the only dreams he's really having, which seems to be... that's what I'm getting from it, basically. Next relevant quotes from the series. Tom isn't actually involved in this book. It is book 47, The Resistance. And I bring this one back because it ties back into book 1. If you know anything about book 47, you'll know that Visser 3's monster morph during this book is the exact same monster that he morphed in book 1. The monster with 8 heads, 8 tentacles, 8 legs, or whatever it is. But that's what he morphs. Visser 1, in a morph I hadn't seen since all of this first began. 8 fire-breathing heads, legs as thick as trees, serpentine necks, eyes like gobs of molten lava. No choice. I charged, bounded over the fallen bodies of sagging Taxons and burnt Hork-Bajir, and in one gigantic leap of pure power, all my strength and speed concentrated in one blow. I smashed into the Visser, sank my 4-inch fangs into one of the monster's 8 serpentine necks. This bit is so good, and it works on multiple levels, like so many things in book 47, The Resistance. In my opinion, the best book in the series, for numerous reasons. But this is one of them, because it points out specifically this is a monster we saw back in book 1. What happened in book 1? We've just recently covered the quotes. Tom turns around, looks at this monster and goes for him. Starts trying to beat him up even though it's completely futile. Why does he do it? We can assume to protect the people who are running the other way. To put himself in harm's way to protect the others around him. Jake, of course, then, in an effort to protect Tom, jumps onto Visser 3's monster as the tiger and starts trying to bite him. What happens in book 47? Jake, in Tiger Morph, pounces on this monster and starts to bite him. Why? He's protecting the others. The Hork-Bajir, the other Animorphs, the Trekkies. He's done it out of wild adrenaline as a means to protect the others about him, his pawns in this war, his factions. He's doing it to protect them, knowing that it's a futile effort. And it works on multiple ways because, firstly, he did it back in book 1 to protect Tom, the thing he's been protecting from the beginning. Towards the end of the series, it's not about individuals, it's not about his brother, it's about his factions, it's about who is on his side, who is going to help him win the war. How he's going to win the war. That's what he's jumped on Visser 3 for this time, not his brother. And the other reason why I think this is relevant, and I didn't point this out in my review, but I've since come to this conclusion, it's him finally turning into his own hero. We know that Tom is his hero. He looks up to his brother. He sees his brother putting himself in harm's way to protect those around him. And now he is doing it for the people around him. And not just his brother. Some of these people he doesn't even know. Some of them he does, but a lot of these people, the Free Hork-Bajir, the Trekkers, he doesn't know them. He's protecting people he doesn't know by going up against this monster, David versus Goliath. He is now the hero he sought to become. And that's why I love this book. It works on so many levels, at every level. It's brilliant. Best book of the series. I cannot compliment that book enough. Probably my favourite book of all time. Book 47, The Resistance. If you don't think so, that's absolutely fine. But it's so good. It's so goddamn good. But this moment pulls together all those strings. It's the Tom, Jake turning into the hero that he wanted to be, the hero that he looked up to. But at the same time, it's a reversal of his character from the person who strives most to protect his family to someone who will destroy his own family to save his not war toys, but his pawns on his chessboard. It's a brilliant moment. Truly is. But there's one more moment in this book. Another brilliant moment. Another moment that's absolutely gold. And it comes at the start of this book, and this is it. I grabbed another stack of papers off the floor. At the top of the first page, a kid had scrawled, "What I did this summer." In the corner were the stamped words, "Good job." Tom's old schoolwork, from before he became a controller. I threw the stack into another box and started to write his name on the lid. Stopped and crossed it out. Printed, "Trash." I didn't have a brother anymore. Even reading that bit back for my research, it struck me like, Jesus. I don't have a brother anymore. We have reached that point. And I think we reached it back in 31, where Jake basically wrote Tom off. Just completely wrote him off, said, I mean, there's a chance, but I'm not hoping on it anymore. I'm not risking anything in order to save him anymore. It's basically, Tom's dead. And I think Tom himself knew that as well, hence why he's done the things he's done, said the things he said, the memories that he had. It's finally come to that point. And the book doesn't beat about the bush, does it? It just says straight up. And my God, it's a hard-hitting moment. Woo! Brilliant stuff. I cannot say enough about that book, so I'm going to stop there before I go on a poetic rambling about my love for this piece of fiction. But the thing is, there is hope that resurfaces a few books down the line, in book 49, The Diversion. Because the animals find out that the Yeerks have a blood bank, and it's starting to figure out who the animals are. Their identities are being uncovered, and they make the decision to rescue their families. And suddenly, I vote yes. But Jake looked at us. I'm taking Tom. It wasn't a question. I know it's a risk, but I think it's a containable risk. My parents won't leave him behind. I won't leave him behind. So as long as everybody understands that, I vote yes. I understand, Prince Jake. Tom's part of the deal, said Rachel. We take Tom first, Jake said. No explanation, no discussion, just grab him. Give him 0 time to react. It shouldn't be hard. He can't fight all 3 of us. Once we have Tom, my parents will come willingly. They won't let us kidnap Tom without them. Some hope returns, but quickly those hopes are dashed, thrown into the basketball hoop of life. They'll be home. Jake dribbled back up the drive, toward the basketball hoop mounted above the garage door. It'll take my dad a while to decide on a lawnmower. Lawnmower? I repeated. Yeah. With Tom. Yeah. Okay, think about this a minute. Tom is fairly high-ranking controller. By now he knows about the blood bank break-in, about a partial human DNA match, but he's spending the morning shopping for a lawnmower. Does that strike you as odd? Turns out the parents are now controllers, and it turns into an ambush, which the animals just about escape. So now not only is Tom a controller, but also Jake's parents, and that's because of Tom. So it's done. That's the thing that Jake had been worried about the whole time, that Tom would eventually strike, and indeed he does. But there is still some hope at the end of this book. They're still alive, I said. We can still save them. Can we? He picked at the splintered edge of the picnic table. What do you think is going to happen to Tom now that Visser One knows he's been living with an Andalite bandit all this time? How much do you think his life is worth? A lot. That's just it, Jake. Visser One needs him. Needs your parents. Now more than ever. He needs them so he can find us. He needs them to draw us out. As long as we keep fighting, Visser One will keep them alive. Tobias is right. Visser 3 keeps them alive because they're effectively bait. So Tobias still holds some hope, as do probably the other animals, but I think by this point Jake is long gone. He talks about saving his parents, he doesn't even talk about saving Tom at the start of that quote. So that leads us then into the climax of the series. This is where Tom becomes a major player. toward the end of the war. After losing his close family to the Yeerks, who are the now controllers, Jake enters somewhat of a pit of depression. Tom wouldn't have hesitated to kill either one of his parents if the Yeerk mission required their deaths. Jake had done an almost superhuman job of protecting his parents, both from death and a fate worse than death, infestation. Until the last time, when the Yeerks finally took them. Jake hasn't been the same since. He blames himself. Yeah, he goes through the motions, but it's like he's lost the spark. Lost whatever it was that kept him going. However, there is a bit of a rally around. So the depression probably becomes because Jake knows that he didn't pay attention to his dream, he didn't deal with the problem that was on his doorstep, and eventually, bang, it came and bit him, basically. But yeah, he rallies, he comes out of this depression and carries on with the mission. And the Animorphs decide to create auxiliary Animorphs. But while they're going to the auxiliary Animorphs, on one fateful night, they get ambushed by none other than Tom. Tom opened his other hand, palm out. "Give it to me." Jake didn't move. Tom wrenched Jake's arm, yanked him closer. "Give it to me, now." Slowly, without taking his eyes off Tom, Jake reached into his pocket, pulled out the blue morphing cube, placed it in Tom's hand. Tom closed his fingers around the cube, grinned. "Okay," he said. "Let's all leave quietly." When we were in the hallway, Tom closed the door behind us. Then he turned and struck Jake savagely across the face. "My host's own brother!" Jake reeled, and a Hawkbajier caught him, propped him up. Tom struck again. "Do you have any idea what you've done to me? All that time we were searching for you, looking for Andalites, and it was you, right there, in my own house. Right down the hall. I could have killed you 1,000,000 times. Visser One almost starved me to death for my stupidity." This is a very interesting interaction of Tom's new Yeerk from book 6, saying to Jake, "You've almost got me killed by Visser One because of apparent incompetence." I mean, Yeerks do get the death sentence for incompetence. So he is very, very peeved that Jake had the nerve to be good at hiding. And so he gives Jake a proper whack. And, you know, Tom's not a small bloke. So this is going to hurt Jake. And also being beaten up by his own brother. Tom's not providing any resistance, by the way. I think the actual real Tom has long passed any sort of resistance at this point. Now, he would have been a controller for, it must be close to 3 years at this point since the start of book 1. And then a few months, because the earlier quote was, "Tom hasn't played video games with me for a few months now." So let's say 3.5 years Tom has been under the control of a Yeerk pretty much 24/7. I think he's beyond the ability to, you know, do the old twitch and what have you. Tom leaves with his hostage, Jake, but Cassie is able to get out and find the auxiliaries that the Animals do have at this point. They were trying to get more, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong. But Cassie comes to the rescue with the auxiliaries to retrieve Jake and the blue box from Tom and his Hawkbajier. And there they were. Tom, his battalion of Hawkbajier, and the Animorphs. Jake was alive. Blood trickled from his forehead, but he was alive. "Go, go, go!" James yelled. Timmy gathered the bobcat's muscular legs beneath him and leapt. Oof! Tom was knocked to the ground. The bobcat bounded off his chest, clamped down on Tom's wrist until he released the gun, battered it into the shadows with his paw, and then the morphing cube rolled from Tom's shirt pocket. James darted forward and grabbed the morphing cube in his teeth. The battle erupts, and the auxiliary animals come in to save the day, and they manage to retrieve the blue box from Tom. So not only has Tom's Yeerk not managed to get the animals from under his nose, he's now lost the blue box. So when Visser One comes into the fight, he's going to have some words with him. And not only does he have words with him, but he also gets raked eyes for his troubles. "Where is the morphing cube?" Visser One demanded. Tom's mouth quivered nervously. Slowly, he got to his feet. His eyes remained on the visor. "It's here, somewhere. The line got it and... So!" the visor roared. "You have failed again. This is the last time. If the bandits do not kill you, I will kill you myself." "Tobias!" "Ah!" Tom clutched his face. Blood gushed through his fingers. He dropped to his knees. Despite getting basically a death sentence from Visser 1 and having his eyes clawed by Tobias, Tom is able to get back up and somehow, I don't know how, retrieve the Escafil device without anybody knowing. Until the end of the battle where he shows up after Cassie's thought about going to get it. And then a very, very big moment happens. A moment that basically brings about, eventually, the end of the war. Let's go through it now. I stopped in my tracks. Because there stood Tom, unsteady, blood dried and streaked on his face, clutching the blue box. And a Dracon beam. His eyes were wild. They darted toward Visser 1. I imagined what Tom was thinking. Whoever had the morphing cube held the future of the planet in his hands. Why would he hand that over to Visser 1? Tom ran. "Back off!" Tom screamed. "I mean it! I'll kill you!" Jake took another step forward. Phew! Tom fired again. The shot hit Jake in the back leg. He fell heavily. Tom took off running, sure that Jake could not follow. But Jake lifted the tiger's 700-pound body on 3 legs and started after his brother, into the shadows, into the darkest place Jake had ever been, the place where he would have to kill his brother, or be killed by him. Suddenly, I remembered my father's face, his voice. "Is what you're doing humane?" No matter which way it went between Jake and Tom, I would lose Jake. Because if Jake had to kill Tom, he'd never be the same. He would cross whatever line it was that separated us from them, and I was pretty sure there was no crossing back. Soft, irregular thudding. Jake, stalking his brother, prepared to kill him. For what? For a morphing cube? For... It wasn't worth it. Suddenly, I knew the truth. I reached the clearing where they both stood. Tom was out of breath, staggering. Jake was only a yard or 2 behind him. Tom turned, lifted his arm, aimed his weapon. "I'll kill you, Jake," he said, voice ragged. "I will." Jake snarled, crouched, prepared to spring. That's when I shot forward and closed my jaws over Jake's uninjured back leg, clamped down. I'd done what I had to do. I'd made the sacrifice. Tom disappeared into the night. Jake and I lay there, panting with pain and fatigue. We had nothing to show for this fight, except that we were alive to fight another day. And tomorrow, Jake could face himself in the mirror. Tom's Yeerk gets away with the Escafil device, and of course, with that, he's able to gain the morphing power, and so are a select handful of Yeerks. This is a massive moment in the Animorphs series. And why did it happen? Because all along, Tom's Yeerk was living with Jake, and he never found it out, so Visser 3 got peeved about it, and so instead of giving the blue box straight to Visser 1, he took it and ran, because he knew that Visser 1 would have killed him there and then for his incompetence. That's why it happened the way it did. Also, this is, some might say, a clear example of the dream being a complete foreshadowing, an actual foreshadowing of what happened, because they're outside in the woods, they're in a clearing, and Jake's in Tiger Morph and Tom's there. I don't think it's exactly accurate because Cassie wasn't there, and then, yeah. And also Tom didn't have the Escafil device in the dream or a Dracon beam. So there are differences from Jake's dream to the reality of what happened, but I think it's very similar to the point where you could say it was a foreshadowing of this moment. The moment that the war was won. But not only is it the moment that the war was won, indirectly, the main movement behind the victory. It was also the moment that Tom lined himself down the path of his doom. So of course Tom has escaped, he's now got the morphing power. And the next time we see him is in the penultimate book of the series, just before the final battle. The Animorphs are taking out the Taxxons that are building a new Yeerk pool since the old one was destroyed. And they collapse into the Yeerk pool, whereupon they meet Arbron and his fellow Taxxons. And then who comes from the shadows? I heard footsteps and peered into the darkness of an access tunnel. Well, good evening, everyone. It's an awfully pretty night to spend it all in a filthy Taxxon tunnel. I knew the voice. I'd heard it every day of my life. My brother, Tom. I'm alone, unarmed, Tom said, holding his arms up in surrender. Hey, I'm morph capable now, you know. If I wanted trouble, I'd use this really cool Jaguar morph I have. I believe what he's saying is true. I don't think he's lying about having a Jaguar morph, because obviously he is now morph capable, and so he's picked up a few morphs. We never see him morph the Jaguar, as far as I'm aware, but 99% certain Tom is able to morph the Jaguar. Then Tom begins to explain why he's there, why he's in the Taxxon tunnel. I can't quite remember why he was there knowing that the animals would do this. I suppose he knew the animals would eventually attack the tunnel, it would cave in, and they would meet, but he must have been hanging out down there for quite a while in this Taxxon tunnel, waiting for the animals to come on down. Either way, let's look at the quote. My people want it too. The morphing power. You said you're already morph capable. I am. And not just this body, by the way, but me. I've subjected my own true Yeerk self to the cube. You want to know what's funny? I can morph Tom. That's right. I can morph into my own host body. Cool, huh? But there are always other Yeerks who are never going to get the chance to be free. Visser 1 is only capable of piling brute force on top of brute force. He's insane, you know. You can't rely on him. You can't hope for career advancement to rise as you should. I should be a sub-Visser by now, and in the small numbers. What I've done on this planet? I've been carrying him for the last 3 years, but as long as... He stopped himself, forced a hard smile. Office politics. You don't want to hear about it. What do you want? Marco asked him. Give it to us ABC. What do you want? Don't even listen to him, Rachel growled. We take him now. Hold on to him for 3 days until the Yeerk starves to death. Then we have Tom back. Tom's Yeerk dropped the wise guy attitude. He ignored Rachel and Marco and even Axe, who still hovered close, twitching with readiness. You take the pool ship, Jake. You can keep it. But I get the blade ship. And 100 of my people, all treated with the morphing cube. And we get a free pass out of this system. Remember when I brought up the whole sub-Visser thing? Well, this is the confirmation that we have that the security chief of Earth isn't even a sub-Visser. How does that work? What does a sub-Visser do? Anyway, what the plan basically is Tom can't go back to Visser 1 because he ran away with the morphing cube. So Visser 3 would probably, Visser 1 at this point, Esplin, would probably have him killed. So he needs a way to get back into the fold, to get back on Visser 1's good side, so he can betray him again further down the road. How's he going to do that? Well, he's going to pretend to have caught the Animorphs, which will put him back in the good books. Surely. How he's going to do that is he's going to have Cassie looking like she's been beaten up, and the Animorphs will be on her as flies or insects or whatever have you. And they would go to Visser 3, and then somehow they would escape onto the ship. What I don't understand about this plan is that surely Tom's not stupid enough to think that the Animorphs are stupid enough to fall for that. That's the one thing I don't get about this whole end game plan. Tom seems to think that the Animorphs will buy that hook, line and sinker. You know what? If you just come with me as insects to Visser 1 on the pool ship, I'll make sure you get, you know, where you need to go. He's relying on the fact that he's come down to the Taxxons unprepared, unarmed, well, not unprepared, unarmed, at the Animorphs' mercy. And he thinks, well, they're good guys, so they're going to fall for this. They're going to fall for this trick because they can trust me. I don't buy it. I don't buy that he would know that. I don't buy that he would not buy them buying him. Christ, what's going on? Tom's Yeerk wanted us to believe we could trust him. He didn't ask for assurances or cross-examine me because he didn't want me to do the same to him. Then I saw it. Of course. I'd been looking at nothing but tactics. I'd overlooked emotion. The emotion of a vengeful Yeerk. He despised Visser-One for being a failure, for being a brute, for refusing to promote him. As long as, Tom had started to say. Yes, Visser-One was not the only person Tom's Yeerk hated. Someone else was to blame for forcing this choice on an ambitious Yeerk. Me. My friends. We were responsible for forcing this choice on Tom's Yeerk. In frustrating Visser-One, we had doomed Tom's Yeerk. That was why Tom's Yeerk didn't ask for reassurances from us. He expected us to be dead. He would kill Visser-One and us and sail off across the galaxy in the blade ship with the morphing cube in his hands. It came to me all at once that I could beat him, use him and beat him. Jake uses this information to come up with a plan to win the day. Unfortunately, it means a lot of manipulation. He manipulates Cassie. Remember back earlier when I said, or we looked at the quote where he said, I want to do this thing and then I want to talk to Cassie after I've done the thing. This is what I was talking about, sending Rachel to her demise. You're sure, Jake? She asked solemnly when I had finished. Because if you tell me to go, I'll follow your orders. You know what that means. Yeah, Rachel. I know what it means. Still, she hesitated. It won't be the Yeerk, Jake. It'll be Tom. It'll be him. I know that, I said. And if it happens, if it comes down that way, I don't have a plan for getting you out. You'd be on your own. That's how I like it. Jake sends Rachel to kill Tom. 2 birds with 1 stone, baby! Why does Jake do this? Because he knows that this is his one opportunity to win the war. And so not only is he going to fulfill his dream or fulfill the prophecy of having to kill Tom. You know, the droid said it would happen. His dream said that one of them would have to kill the other. He's fulfilling that. But at the same time, he's fulfilling another prophecy. This one's less of a prophecy, more just a foreshadowing. He's fulfilling Rachel's destiny. Her destiny to die. He's doing them both in one go. But first, of course, Tom has to gain access to the blade ship. The Taxon's mouth ripped Cassie apart, chewed arms and legs, spilled organs out onto the deck of the pull ship, and finally lifted off her head in one fatal bite. The voice, really very like Cassie's, screamed, begged, cried for mercy. Tom waved goodbye. If you were there by any chance, little brother Jake, bye-bye. Tom had betrayed us, as I knew he would. He believed we were all hiding on the true Cassie. He believed he had beaten the true Cassie, and that she had submitted in order to make her capture seem real. Very good, Visser-One said, laughing. I've lived to see at least one of them die. That was very satisfying. Now, go, my good and faithful servant. Take the blade ship. Kill the Taxon rebels for me. Hammer them into submission. This is all because the Yeerks don't know about the Chi, or at least Tom doesn't know about the Chi. Hence why he thinks he's killed Cassie, which must have the other animals away. They wouldn't voluntarily give up Cassie, so that's him convinced. And he goes to the blade ship. And this is where the animals decide to take the pull ship, which they do. And then it's time to, you know, do the deed, as it were. But Tom might fire on them. He's been called down from the blade ship to come bring the blade ship closer to the pull ship. And there's a moment here where Jake has a strange outburst. So they're talking about Tom. And Jake has never before had an outburst where he says, no, it's not Tom we're talking about, it's the Yeerk. He's done it himself where he's said Tom, but it's almost like he knows that Tom is about to die. So he wants to finally say, no, this isn't Tom. I'm not killing Tom, even though he knows he is. It's like he's trying to defend himself. He's trying to relieve himself of some of this guilt by saying, no, Tom's already gone. It's the Yeerk we're killing. Eric's down to core programming. No discretion. He cannot enable a major weapon system. Flat cannot. We'll be sitting ducks if Tom turns the blade ship against us. And we all know that's his plan. I exploded. It's not Tom! It's not Tom! Don't call him that! It's the Yeerk in his head. It's the Yeerk, not my brother! No one even looked shocked at my reaction. No one was in his right mind at that moment. Tobias hated me. Hated me. I could feel it, and I hated myself. This is, of course, after the other animals figure out what Rachel's doing. She was on Tom as he went to the blade ship. So Rachel is with him. And the other animals now know this. Hence why Jake feels he's able now to say, it's not Tom we're killing, it's the Yeerk. He's trying to convince himself in some way to relieve some of that guilt. And then then it happens. Jake gives the order. Just before Tom can do any damage, he gives her the order to kill him. You seem to be experiencing some engine trouble, Visser, Tom gloated. The Empire will track you down and kill you. You do understand that, I hope? Oh, I doubt it. I think the Empire will have its hands full, Tom's Yeerk said cheerfully. The Andalite fleet is rather close by. It's possible that I misled you on that point. Then he caught sight of me. His face paled. His eyes went wide. All at once he knew. You're not dead! I noticed the same thing, Visser once said dryly. Tom snapped an order to his crew. Bring us around to target the Erkbul's bridge! Do it! Now! Now! Bring us around! Jake, Tobias said, pleading, knowing, but pleading anyway. Rachel. Rachel, I said. Go. Tom, the Yeerk in Tom's head, was closing in for his final act of betrayal. He would kill his master, Visser 1, and doom his fellow Yeerks. He thought we were already dead. Surprise, Tom. My favourite morph was the grizzly bear. 7 feet tall, standing erect. You cannot imagine the power, especially when united with human intelligence and knowledge. Compared to my grizzly morph, a human being is like something made out of glued together popsicle sticks. How many times have I felt that change as muscle piles on muscle, as the thick brown fur covers me, as the rail spike claws grow from my fingers. The grizzly bear and I had been through a lot together. I would go to grizzly to kill Tom. Tom then reveals that he has another morph aside from the jaguar. He morphs a snake. I mean, it's a villain in a work of fiction, why wouldn't he? It's just like the standard, isn't it? I hate these sorts of tropes. Tom shrieked. I couldn't see him, but I felt something squirming, like a worm on a fish hook. The snake was impaled on my claws. No! Tom cried in outrage. I brought my paw to my mouth. Sorry, I said vaguely. Jake, stop her! The Yeerk screamed of Tom's mouth. I bit down on the snake. Does make you wonder, if he really did have a jaguar morph, why didn't he morph that? Surely that would have more chance of surviving than a freaking snake against a grizzly bear. I mean, you're just asking for trouble, really, aren't you? The fool! Anyway, Tom dies. And Rachel also dies. She gets killed by the Yeerk in the polar bear morph. So, 2 for 1. Jake has gotten them both killed, but in doing so, he has won the war. The ultimate fulfilling of the prophecy. It's not technically a prophecy, is it? Or is it? I don't know. Anyway, he thinks to himself, Tom was dead. And I wondered how I was ever going to explain it. I had ordered my cousin to execute my brother. How would I ever explain that? All these years I'd fought to keep us all alive, to stop the Yeerks, always with the hope that someday I would save my brother, that he would come back, that he'd be Tom again. That was why I'd enlisted in the war to begin with. I was going to save Tom. Jake carried Tom and Rachel and those 17,000 Yeerks around his neck like the ancient mariner and his albatross. This is a strange thing because I've got one more quote for you here, and the implication of this quote is that Jake enjoyed that moment. Listen to this. I was suddenly exhausted, worn out all the way, deep down, and everyone had run out of things to say. After a long, awkward silence, I said, anyway, I gestured out toward the water. I wanted to say that it was the first real joy I had felt since seeing Rachel kill Tom. but there was a wall between me and Cassie. And Marco, well, he's a guy, and we guys don't do a lot of emotional stuff with one another. Anyway, I'll be good tomorrow on the stand. I do find that strange that Jake in his own inner monologue says that it was a moment of joy for him when Rachel took out Tom, his cousin and his brother, his hero, both dying at his behest, and he felt joy in that moment. Why? Why did he feel joy in that moment? Considering that rescuing Tom was the very reason he started doing this in the first place. He started desperate to get his brother to escape, and in the end, his final act of this whole shebang was taking joy out of watching his brother die. It's the fulfilling of Jake's character arc. The best character arc of the series. I don't think there's any question about it. You might disagree. I don't think there's any question about it. I think that journey following Jake is incredible. And it's all tied to Tom. Everything in this series has the thread line. And that thread line is Tom. To be more certain, it's the thread line is Jake and Tom throughout the whole thing. But Jake wouldn't be a thing without Tom being a controller. So Tom being a controller is one of the most integral parts of this whole series. The major plays that go on, every major decision is in some way indirectly linked to Tom being a controller. And eventually it brought down the Yeerk Empire. Just this one guy being a controller and living 2 doors down from our main hero. So to summarise, Tom is Jake's hero, his brother and his best friend. You can say Mark is his best friend, but forgive me, I'm being sentimental. He is Jake's hero, and Jake wants more than anything to save his brother, and he takes that first fateful trip down to the Yeerk pool just to do that. They fail, and because of that failure, they put a pause on rescuing Tom, knowing that another mistake, another failed rescue could mean Tom's death. Jake, through Temrash 114, is able to see the memories that Tom holds from the time he was first turned into a controller to the times he's spoken to Jake while being a controller, and senses that Tom is giving up the fight. He tries to give him hope over the telephone, but somewhere between 1 and 2 years later, all the way up into book 31, The Conspiracy, Tom has given up hope. And to an extent so has Jake, to the point where Jake is more than willing to sacrifice his brother's life for his father's life. And he's also willing to allow Tom to drown. Were it not for the intervention of the other Animorphs at that moment, then he would have drowned and Tom would be no more. But the other Animorphs and Cassie and all that lot say, no, Jake, we're going to keep that hope alive for you. Probably because they know that without that hope, Jake would quite possibly collapse. And he nearly does toward the end of the series, where he loses the rest of his close family, his father and his mother, to the Yeerks because of Tom. Being a controller, taking the family out, instead of going to buy a lawnmower, they've gone straight to the Yeerk pool to get infested. So Jake enters that pit of depression. Cassie sees how this affects Jake, seeing this happen to his family. And among many other reasons, she stops him killing Tom when he has the Escafil device, allowing Tom to escape with it. Tom had already disappointed Visser 1 to the point where Visser 1 had promised to kill him, hence why Tom ran away with the blue box and Jake followed. Cassie stopped Jake killing Tom. Tom gets away with the Escafil device and gives a number of Yeerks the power to morph. He then comes up with a plan, Tom's Yeerk, to trick the Animorphs and Visser 3 in order that he comes out on top and everyone else is destroyed. But Jake sees through this plan. Visser 3 or Visser 1 or Espen, however you want to call him, is defeated And then just before Tom can unleash that final blow, he sees that his plan to kill the animals has failed. And Jake, having been one step ahead, gets Rachel to kill Tom and also bring about her own demise. He kills his brother, but in that moment he feels joy. Why? Because he's won. He's become his own hero as well. Because Tom, the brave soul, was willing to stand up in book 1 against the 8-headed monster. Even though it was a David against Goliath situation, he had no chance of winning. He stepped up at risk of his own personal safety to save the people around him. Jake, at the end of the series, destroyed his own brother in order to save the people around him. In destroying Tom, he became Tom. And that is the story of Tom, from my obviously opinionated and personal perspective. And you're more than welcome to have your own thoughts about what Tom means. Now, before we finish, there is one thing I do want to say, and it's a major flaw in Tom's character. So I've gone all about the good stuff, the story, and why it matters, how it played such a major role in the story. But there's one thing that I think would have made it even better, would have made it chef's kiss, beautiful. They never developed Tom's character. For such an integral part of the thread line of the whole series, and we never so much as describe the colour of his bed sheets. We never get anything, really. We know he's a good basketball player. We know that he's known to be brave. We do see a moment of that, to be fair, we do see a moment of that. But we never really connect to Tom. Apart from a couple of little moments here or there, we never connect to him. We never go into his room, for example, and see a freaking diary, or, you know, see what his favourite basketball, a picture of him with Jake or something like that. We never truly connect with him. So there's not as much emotional weight to the Tom story as, say, there is with Rachel. Think about it. Jake, pretty much the main character of the series. He lives 2 doors down to a controller. We never, once or twice we get interactions of them within the house or whatever have you, but that's such a gold mine. Willing to be mined, but we don't. It is like you're a prospector and you live 2 doors down from a bristling gold mine. It's got gold just pouring out of the wazoo, and you know that deep down there's always lovely treasure, and you think instead, nah, I'm not going to go to that one. I'm going to go over west, 5 miles down that way. Just, I thought I saw a rock and there might be some gold behind that. I'm going to go over there and do that, rather than mine this gold mine right next door to me. That's what it's like. That's what it feels like. All this potential of living 2 doors down from a controller in your own house. And we got very little from it. At all. The closest we got was book 31, which was a fantastic book and showed us that there was so much potential there. But alas, we never really truly got it. To put it another way, Tom didn't feel like a character. Tom felt like a plot device, a tool for Jake. Everything about Tom's character is how it relates to Jake. And that does make him just feel like a tool, a plot device. And that's a shame, really. It would have been nice to add to those little tiddly bits that were dotted around here or there. Like him saying, "Get out of here, midget." That's nice and all, but we don't know this character, really. So it doesn't have the same emotional weight behind it. Even the TV show tried. Granted, it failed miserably, but at least the TV show tried to give him some character.
Man, you can't think like that. Because it does make a difference. It shows them that we're fighters. And that makes me respect myself.
The difficult thing I understand is that you're not really going to get any opportunity to have him outside of Yeerk control. I understand that. I do. There were there could possibly be means to finding a way around that problem, but largely you're going to be relying on implicative stuff. Like Jake just walking to his room. We don't even know what his room looks like. We don't know what's in his room. We don't know what this guy owns. We don't know what he does in his spare time other than the sharing. I mean, there was the whole basketball thing, but we didn't even see him play or awards, pictures of him with the basketball. We were just told he was a good basketball player. Well, okay, that's easy. That's easy. I can make a character and say he was a very brave soccer player. That's not putting in the effort to make a character. That's just spouting it off of the top of my head and expecting you to just take it on board and, yeah. I thought that there needed to be more for Tom. There needed to be more for us to dig our teeth into. But aside from that issue, Tom is a very, very important character. And from his inclusion came a lot of strong plot points. A lot. Some brilliant moments. It is just a shame that he was little more than a plot device. We'll see what his Yeerks are like in future AniLysis videos, but that is the Tom AniLysis. And if anything else comes up, I might do an addendum. I think I've pretty much covered it. Please feel free to have your say in the comments below. And remember to like, subscribe, and become a member if you're that way inclined. You'll get videos early access. So what's going to be the next AniLysis? We're going to be looking at number 73 next. Last time we had the Hawk-Bajir. This time we had Tom. There's been a lot of research going on and I've hardly had any time to do anything else, so I'm hoping for a small one. So let's jump onto the spin the wheel game. Same as last time, we've got every available AniLysis from book 1 to up to and including the Hawk-Bajir Chronicles. I'm still in the process of going through book 23 audiobook, and it's a grand one so far. But let's spin the wheel and see what we have next time. Something small, something small, something small. Please, I want time to myself for a change. Give it to me. Give it to me. The river. The river. Okay. That's, yeah, I can cope with that. That's I'll have to look through every single book, but I don't think there'll be much to do with the river, so yeah, I'm okay with that. I'm okay. We're going to look at the river next time. The river that runs from the mountains down to the sea. We sort of covered it in the mountains one, really. But we'll do that next time. Thank you very much for watching. It's been another long one for all of us. And I will see you for the next one. So see you somewhere else in the Animals universe. Ta-ra.